All right, my friends, we are going to pick up our conversation about patterns and numbers. Last time we looked at a specific pattern where, as we went from term to term, that pattern stayed the same. That rate of change remained constant, and we described that as a linear pattern. What we're going to look at today is something where that does not happen, and figure out how to describe that, and then what kind of pattern we should be able to recognize from that. So let's just jump right on in here. So I'm going to look at the first couple here, kind of give you an idea of how things are changing and how to work with them and describe them, and then I'll let you do a couple on your own here. So just like we did last time, we're going to look term to term and see how the numbers are changing. So when I go from 1 to 2, notice I add 1. When I go from 2 to 4, I add 2. When I go from 4 to 7, I add 3. And then I add 4. Then I add 5. And then I add 6. So what we can see here is it becomes very evident after the first 2 or 3 terms that our rate of change is not remaining constant. And in fact, what's happening is our rate of change is increasing, so we want to describe how that rate of change is increasing. So I would say rate of change, okay, I'm going to abbreviate that, ROC, is increasing by 1. So we want to describe that, so then that way I know, it's like, oh, if this, my rate of change for this term was 6 and it's increasing by 1, then my next one has to be 7, which means this had to be 29. All right, and that helps us extend that pattern. Now, what we call this is the first difference, and in the last lesson, that first difference, remained constant, and we said that was linear. Well, now if we look, when I go from 1 to 2, I go up 1. When I go from 2 to 3, I go up 1. When I go from 3 to 4, I go up 1, and then up 1, and then up 1, and then up 1. So what you can see now, and we call this the second difference, all right, is that the second difference is remaining constant, and that's really going to be the pattern that we look at today. So let's jump in and look at the next one here. So notice when I go from 3 to 5, I go up 2, and then I go up 4. And then I go up 6, and then 8, and then 10, and then 12. So once again, very clear that it's not remaining constant, so we're not in that linear pattern. And we can still see that our rate of change is increasing, all right? And so we're going to say it's increasing, and then we can see that it's going up by 2. And then once again, I could easily say, oh, our next one's going to be plus 14. That's going to get me to 59. All right, and once again, you can look at that second difference, and you can see that everything is increasing by 2. All right, so we can see that the second difference is remaining constant. All right, so what I'm going to do now is let you take a look at the next 3. So I'd like you to figure out, okay, how that rate of change is changing and describe that in words. Pause the video, turn back on, we'll see how you do. All right, so let's take a look at the next 3 here and see how you did. Now notice on this one, we are moving down. So I'm going to go down 3, and then I'm going down 6, and then down 9, then down 12. And then down 15. Oh, and that should be a 37. So hopefully that did not throw you off there. Sorry, did not mean for that to be tricky there. So that should be negative 37. All right, so our rate of change is decreasing. All right, so we can definitely see it's going down, and then it's decreasing by 3. All right, so then I would know I would subtract 18 to get to the next one. All right, now let's look at this one. Now this one's a little tricky because it changes direction, but the pattern remains the same. All right, so I can add 5 here, and then I add 3 here, and then I add 1 here. But notice when I go from -1 to -2, I'm now changing directions, and I'm subtracting 1, then I'm subtracting 3, then I'm subtracting 5. And that may seem a little weird, all right, because like up here they seem to be all positives and they seem to be all negatives here. But what happens is that there's a turning point in the middle of our data, and we just don't see that turning point here because it's off to the left. If we were to continue this pattern to the left, we would find that turning point. But if we look at the second difference and what happens, it is remaining constant. So notice when I go from 5 to 3, I subtract 2. When I go from 3 to 1, I subtract 2. When I go from 1 to -1, I subtract 2. And then I subtract 2, and then I subtract 2. So we can see that rate of change, or excuse me, it's going down by 2 each time by looking at that second difference. And then once again, we can describe this, that the rate of change is decreasing by 2. And then once again, we could extend that pattern, subtract 7, and I know I'm going to get to -17 here. Now the good news is once I find that turning point, it is symmetric to that turning point. So I go -2, -5, -5, -10, -17. I also know this would be -17 over here. So once I do find that turning point, my life becomes a little bit easier as far as extending the pattern because I know it's going to be symmetric on both sides. All right, and let's look at this final one real quick. All right, so notice here I go down 4, then I go down 2, and then I go down none, and then I'm back up 2, and then I'm back up 4, and then I'm back up 6. So once again, we see that we have a turning point, all right, and that turning point actually happens in between here, all right. We just can't see it, all right, and so we can know that it would be symmetric. So I can see 2, 4, 8, 14 this way. It would be 2, 4, 8, 14 this way. All right, and then once again, if you look at that, I'm adding 2 to get here. I'm adding 2 to get here. Add 2, add 2, add 2. So you can see that rate of change is increasing by 2. All right, so now, just like we did last time, I want you to have a picture of kind of what this means graphically. Click this out. There we go. All right, so if we look at this, so now you can see that we have this curve here. All right, so it's not linear. All right, so we can see that we have one side, and the turning point here is actually at 0. So if we were to extend this pattern, it would come up and around over here. Same thing here is our guide, and it would keep going this way, but if we extended it back, it would turn and come back up and be symmetric on this side. And you can see that, okay, and here's the one that was decreasing, and then once again, here you can see there's that symmetry that I was talking about. So we get matching points and points of symmetry around that turning point, all right, and it would look something like that. All right, so we call this a quadratic pattern. All right, so we have a linear pattern from the last guy, all right, when that first difference or the original rate of change remains constant, but if the second difference remains constant, now we have a quadratic pattern. All right, so let's look at some examples. I've already done that, so I've already talked about how to describe the words. I did it on the last slide. Okay, so let's do this. And I'll do the first one here for you, and then I'll let you do the next two on your own. Okay, so now what we want to do is continue our pattern. So we're going to look at our rates of change to do that. So when I look here, I add 3 to go from -4 to -1. From -1 to 4, I add 5, and then I add 7, then I add 9. So I can see that my rate of changes is increasing by 2. So now I know this has got to be add 11, so then that's going to be 31. This would be add 13, so that would be 44. And then I would add add 15, and that would give us to 59. So we just have to look at how that rate of change is changing and apply that same pattern. All right, so go ahead and pause the video, do those next two, and see if you can find those next 3 terms in our sequence. All right, so let me flip to the answer slide here and see how you did. All right, so when we look at this, I go down 1, then 2, then 3, then 4, then 5, then 6, and then 7. All right, so we see our rate of change is decreasing by 1 each time. All right, here we go up 5, and then we go up 3, then we go up 1. So now we can see that I'm subtracting 2, so now I got to go down 1, down 3, down 5, and down 7. So you can see we get that turning point, and then we can see the symmetry on both sides of the turning point. All right, so now for the biggest challenge, let's see if you can extend this, all right, in both directions. Now, once again, think about that turning point. If you find that turning point, we know there's going to be some symmetry around that. So go ahead and pause the video, attempt those two, and then we'll see how you did. All right, so let me flip to the answer slide here. All right, so you started with 5 and you ended at, all right, 15. All right, so when we look at the pattern here, I added 4, then I added 3, then I added 2, then I added 1, and then I would add 0. And then now I can see that these are all decreasing by 1. So now there's that turning point. All right, now I'm going to start matching. So I'm going to subtract 1, and then I subtract 2. Now, if we just look at that, we have to reverse that pattern. So this would be now a +5, and then a +6, and then a +7. So when I look at it, I'm going to have to reverse that. So 5 minus 5 is 0. 0 minus 6 is -6. -6 minus 7 is -13. All right, but you can then see that symmetry here that it would match. So right here, when I know this is 12, I know this is going to be now 9, 5, 0. So once you find that turning point, it's really much easier because we can use our symmetry there. All right, let's look at our last one here. We started at 10 and you went to -26 here. So we can see I subtracted 6, then I subtracted 8, then 10, then 12, and then I can see that I subtracted 14, and then 16, and then 18. And then once again, I can look at this pattern and just kind of keep going. That must have been subtracting 4 here, and then subtracting 2 here, and then subtracting 0 here. So then to reverse that, 10 plus 4 would be 14. 14 plus 2 would be 16. 16 plus 0 would be 16. All right, my friends, that wraps up our lesson on a quadratic pattern. All right, so what I'd like you to do now is go ahead and finish the self-assessment questions, all right, in the Google form. Submit that, and then come in and check in with me.